Hello everybody, my name is Rebecca Hoak, and this is my performance assessment task presentation for the data action model process for CHT 450 for fall 2018. An overview of the data action model process in general. Data meeting 1 consisted of completing the Notice and Wonder protocol and creating exploratory questions. Data meeting 2 consisted of completing the artifact tracking sheet and triangulating the data. Data meeting 3 consisted of identifying learning and instructional gaps and creating SMART goals. Data meeting 4 consisted of developing a data action plan and completing the action plan tracking sheet. Data meeting 5 consisted of evaluating the data and modifying the data once the peer review was completed. The focus of our data action plan. The content area of my data action plan consists of literacy or reading. The grade level that I implemented my data action plan was in 2nd grade. My mentor teacher was named Mrs. Schwartz. The school district that I conducted my data action plan is at Brownsville Elementary. Some demographics of the students at the school consists of 21 students in the classroom that my mentor teacher taught in. 44% of them were economically disadvantaged. 21.9% are special education students out of the whole school district. Types of data and assessment used. Some data that was used by my mentor teacher consisted of Ed Insight on-hand scopes and ALMA, which was used to record attendance. Some assessments that were used includes DIBELS, NWEA map growth, and formative summative assessments. Data meeting 1 overview. This is when we completed our Notice and Wonder protocol. I noticed that most of the students needed intensive support after the testing was done. I noticed that 10 out of 21 students could not retell correctly. I wonder what kind of support is being done in the regular classroom to help the students score higher. And I wonder how much of a change is able to be measured after the second time the test is administered. Data meeting 1 continued. Our exploratory questions consisted of how do we know that the students aren't just bad at testing? How can we factor in testing anxiety? How can you test a student in a normal classroom environment so that they can use the same knowledge and skill set with less pressure? Data meeting 2 consisted of our artifact tracking sheet, and this is when we identified each measurable issue as an observable learning gap or an observable instructional gap, and we identified their relative significance and their prominence in the classroom. Data meeting 2 continued. DIBELS nonsense fluency graph was identified as an instructional gap. DIBELS assessment is a learning gap. H, F, I, and A words were identified as an instructional gap. Reading 1-to-1 was a learning gap. Cold reads and reading orally together is a learning gap. Reading vocabulary and comprehension was identified as an instructional gap and learning gap. Data meeting 2 completed. Our group feels that this artifact type could be both a learning gap and an instructional gap based on all 3 categories included on this artifact. Vocabulary and comprehension are taught through instruction, and reading is something that the students learn on an independent level and from prior experiences. Data meeting 3, this is when we identified the learning gaps and completed the charts, and this was our implementation tips and methods. We decided that intentional small group instruction, exploring prior knowledge that is relevant to the text, setting purposes for reading, contextualizing the text, previewing the text to get a sense of the structure and content, providing the students with tips before reading, intervention and repetition, practicing normal fluency, and practicing vocabulary words and identifying their context would help the students. Data meeting 3 continued. Our SMART goal was the percentage of first grade students meeting 70% or higher on reading, vocabulary, and comprehension will increase by 30%. The evaluation metric or assessment consisted of a written test that would be the best assessment of student knowledge for reading, vocabulary, and comprehension. And in order to assess their success in the test, the teacher will use a rubric. Data meeting 4, action plan tracking sheet. So after our SMART goal was identified, we talked about what we would do in the classroom to help close the instructional gaps. Those consisted of flashcards, realia, book bag strategies, retelling reminder bookmarks, and written tests. That would be the best form of assessment of student knowledge for reading, vocabulary, and comprehension. And like we said before, to assess the success of the test, the teacher will use a rubric. We talked about who would conduct these tactic methods, and that we identified the general education teacher as the one who would be doing the implementations. And for the frequency of how frequent and how often these tactic methods would be done would be every day in a normal classroom. We didn't identify completion date at first, and the verifying artifacts, the ways that the teacher could tell that the students are using these tactic methods correctly, consist of observations and written bookmarks. The peer review feedback on my data action plan consists of being proficient. My mentor teacher said that the action plan has a lot of realistic goals that are measurable, and that the students would be able to benefit from the activities in my plan, but she suggested that I create a time frame that goes along with the goals in mind, and I have to design the specific details that go along with the implementations. The things that I changed and the revisions that I made to the action plan consists of adding a completion date to all the tactic methods, which consists of conducting them all year round, which includes fall to spring, August to May, or the whole year. Insight into the data action model process. I believe that collecting data is very important and necessary to ensure student success. Analyzing multiple sources of data is the key to ensuring that your instruction is research-based. Personalizing learning based on the data to meet instructional and learning gaps is a very important part of being an educator. Working with others takes a lot of effort, but it is worth it to hear other points of view and opinions. Strengths and areas of growth from this project. I found ways to collect more sources, cross-reference them just to be sure. I learned how to make sure that my decision-making is accurate based on my data. I learned how to check that all of my interpretations are accurate. I found ways to create a schedule for when I collect that performance data, and I learned how to validate all of my decisions. After working with my PLC group, my social skills were sharpened and my communication skills were benefited because everybody's point of view was taken into account, and we had to learn how to work together based on our individual needs. These are my references. Thank you so much for watching.